Right, so here is case 4. Just to go to case 4, actually, just to verify that we're on the right one, PepsiCo. So the first question here is, a reference to some sort of comparison around the various theories and how they relate to PepsiCo. So if we look at the theories in ethics, I think the key thing, and we've discussed this in class a couple of times, in order to get ethics right, you have to first start with your theory, with your appropriate philosophy. So when we look at the theories in ethics, we have those teleological, deontological, ethical, relativism, objectivism, and virtue ethics. So just to go through each of those, ethical relativism is that it denies that there is the universal set of valid moral principles, and that principles will vary from community to community, from society to society. So it's very difficult to argue that we can set standards globally that every single person from a morality perspective will adhere to. So it depends on the context, it depends on society, it depends on where you are in the world. So there are two schools of thought in terms of this one. Conventionalism, where we look at your ethics and your morals is only valid within the context at a particular culture, in a particular culture, at a particular point in time. And the reason for is that cultures evolve. And you can't argue that culture is something static, therefore our morals and principles will adjust along with the culture. But key, though, is that it will vary from one culture to another culture. The second one is subjectivism, which argues that your choices that you make and your decision in terms of your own morals, values, and principles would really determine what is valid from a behavior perspective. I'm not a big fan of ethical relativism. It doesn't give us enough to work with. The second one, ethical objectivism, where we realize that morality would depend on the culture that you're within, but there are certain moral principles that hold universal validity. And it doesn't matter that they're not universally recognized, but there's certain values, there's certain principles that are non-negotiable in terms of being a human on the planet. So the key thing is that from a strong ethical objectivism, there's only one true moral system. We know that's not true, but I think we talk and prefer to talk about core morality. So there are certain moral principles, and those include respect for human life, respect for the planet, respect for others. Those are non-negotiable, and it doesn't really matter which community or society you're part of. Right. And then ethical philosophies, teleological, my apologies. I think here it is about the that we take is there to focus on maximizing the greater good. It really is the outcomes that determine whether you are ethical or not. It is not the means by which you arrive at those outcomes. So we focus on the outcomes, and instead of we focus on what is achieved. And then ethical egoism. Here we look at serving a person's self-interest, but the problem with that, if you only serve your self-interest, the focus is so narrowly on yourself that it could be at the expense of others. So a real challenge, and we know that there are some individuals that are in positions to serve their own ego and to serve their own family and benefit only themselves, even if it hurts others. And I'm not going to talk about who those are. Utilitarianism, and here we look at we initially look at what is good, And then we decide how we can go and achieve that. And if every individual looks after their own self-interest, the entire benefit will be that we'll end up in a situation that we work for the greater good. So the aggregation of that self-interest is what will ultimately determine the greater good. Um, monism, my apologies for that. Not a big fan of this one. It's based on self-realization, and essentially it is the idea that your own happiness and your own well-being essentially is good for a person, and therefore good for morality. So essentially it is about fulfilling the goals of the welfare of human beings. But the term is it is often looking after your own welfare instead of those of the greater good. I have a bit of an issue with this, but it's about happiness and well-being. But sometimes the focus for me is too narrow. And then deontological, I think it's this idea that depending on context, your action will either be right or wrong. So again, there are no ethical standards. We've spoken about this in class already, where there are certain actions that might be illegal, but will be ethical. And that there are no principles that determine what is ethical or not ethical. So from a deontological perspective, I think negative rights, that here we look at protecting people from harm. We've spoken about if you had to walk into your home and someone's threatening your family, the negative right would be to take that person out in order to protect your own family. Positive rights is that it provides us with those things that we need to exist. The idea of social contract is that a business is a member of a community and that we have certain responsibilities as the member of that community. And social justice, it is about ultimately the benefits that we share and obviously who will carry the burden for sharing those benefits. And then virtue ethics, yeah, no universal ethics, but it really is about how we live our lives and that we don't harm others, that we look after other people's interests along with our own interests. The second question, three types of corporate social responsibility as they apply. So it's these three guys: ethical, altruistic, and then strategic corporate social responsibility. In terms of ethical responsibility, here we look again at moral standards and duties, and essentially the idea that we are, as an organization, expected to look after more than just the interests of our shareholders, but we also have certain legal obligations and that we have to adhere to those legal obligations. And those are often contained in pieces of legislation. And it's about making sure that you adhere and stick to the bare minimum requirements of that legislation. Altruistic is that we work for the common good and that we benefit from our own operations, those individuals in communities. It is around corporate social responsibility. It is contributing to stakeholder well-being and wealth. And then strategic CSR is this idea that we build it into our strategic goals, realizing that if it's part of our strategic goals, we should be sustainable and that we should be, because of our corporate social responsibility, be around for extended periods of time. And the focus all the time is that by doing good, the organization benefits, and the benefit will be by becoming sustainable. And then possible challenges for business ethics. So some of these challenges will always be there. And it's this idea that people will always have certain behaviors and organizations that cannot meet certain minimum legal standards. So we see unethical conduct where it's not so much about how we make the money, it's just the fact that we make the money. So there are tons of codes of ethics, but often these codes of ethics are are not able to counter for every bit of behavior in an organization, because the world evolves and people find new ways of cheating and new ways of benefiting themselves at the expense of others. Other challenges, I think the key one is that there's always this need for profitability, that there's always this pressure on balancing how much should be for profitability versus how much should be for doing corporate social responsibility initiatives. And then just here are some additional ones. And I think what happens, so in addition to having to constantly make a profit and look after the interests of your shareholders, I think there are other examples of misconduct. The first one is this idea of far away and silent. And we know that there is a lack of ethics, but employees don't speak up because they know that they could be sidelined. And remember, we spoke about snitches and stitches. And then sycophantic executives. I think often executives become so self-important and start serving their own interests and start believing that they are beyond reproach and that they are beyond the laws that it would apply to other individuals. The weak board, those individuals looking after the interests of stakeholders. And then we also have people who serve self-interest, who will take decisions that will benefit themselves rather than benefit the business. And then overconfidence, where people have initial successes in a business and they think those successes are guaranteed into the future, despite the fact that the world has moved on. And then greenwashing, where we do bad, but we report ourselves as being fantastic. We see this in companies who have claimed to be net zero and are found to be the exact opposite of net zero. Right. So that's question or case 4.